CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. Food and fuel running low in Gaza. Israel says the enclave will remain under a total siege until all hostages are released. The United States will never end support for Israel. Antony Blinken pledges more military aid and gives a warning to Hamas during a visit to Tel Aviv. And NATO condemns the Hamas attacks against Israel, but says the response must be proportionate. Israel says there will be no humanitarian concessions to its siege of Gaza until all hostages are freed. At least 150 Israelis were taken into the territory by Hamas fighters after their unprecedented attack at the weekend. The Palestinian armed group and Israeli military continued to strike targets, with the death toll on both sides rising. On Wednesday, the only power station in Gaza ran out of fuel. Aid groups say that essential supplies are running low, with many people taking shelter inside hospitals as border crossings remain closed. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has promised unwavering support for Israel after meeting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv. Well, we can talk to our correspondent, Stephanie Freed, who is at the Israel-Gaza border. So, Stephanie, what have we heard from this meeting between Antony Blinken and Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, as it turns out, it's meetings, which is highly unusual. The Secretary of State met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Then he met with Israel's president, defense officials, and now he's meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu again. And the statements that came out of the initial meeting, as you noted, he essentially was voicing the U.S. support for Israel, that as long as the United States exists, is what he said, Israel will have an ally and will have support. And that's essentially the understanding of why he's here, to show a face, to show in person the U.S. support beyond the words that we heard from President Biden a few days ago. This is to be here, boots on the ground, considering this situation currently, as you will. On Friday, Secretary of State Blinken is meant to meet with the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, in Jordan, from what we understand, and possibly he'll be meeting with King Abdullah also in Jordan. But again, this is a show very much of support on what may very well be, could be the eve of, not this exact eve, but in general terms, the eve of what may be an Israel ground incursion into Gaza.
Meanwhile, we've seen more rockets fired from Gaza into Israel.
That's right, and just within the past few minutes, right here in our position, we're in Sderot. This is a city that's right on the dividing line between Gaza and Israel. Behind me, you see the wreckage of a police station that was taken over by Hamas militants last Saturday and destroyed, burnt. Up to 20 people were killed inside by the militants, plus militants. So essentially, Israel razed that police station behind me. But beyond that, rockets fired on Jerusalem, sort of a hello greeting to Antony Blinken being in Israel, although he wasn't specifically in Jerusalem. As well, Syria is attributing strikes on the airports in Damascus and Aleppo. They're attributing those to Israel. And the understanding here is that that is in retaliation for mortar fire that came from Syria in recent days. Also, it could be a way of keeping any Iranian weapons supplies moving to Hezbollah in Lebanon from Syria. The death toll, Israel says, from the Hamas militant onslaught into Israel on Saturday has risen to or passed beyond 1,300. And also a Patriot air defense missile was fired in northern Israel in the past hour. No details yet about what that's all about or the details around that. And the very last bit, you were talking about the aid and humanitarian aid, as well as fuel, electricity, and goods, supplies to Gaza. And you said, and that's Israel is reiterating, until kidnapped people that were taken into Gaza, women, children, elderly, soldiers. Until they're returned, the supplies stay cut off. So that's the very latest that we have. Also waiting for word to see what will be the latest in terms of Israel's next moves here.
Stephanie, thank you very much. Our correspondent Stephanie Fried there on the Israel-Gaza border. Well, the situation there is meaning that we're having some difficulties making contact with our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. We hope to bring you the latest from Gaza later on in the programme. Meanwhile, the head of NATO has condemned the Hamas attacks against Israel, but says the response must be proportionate. Israel's defence minister joined the second day of talks in Brussels via video link. Several members of the military alliance said they were providing practical support to his country. Well, our correspondent Alex Cadier is in Brussels. So, Alex, the Israeli defence minister attending remotely, how was his appearance received in the meeting?
Well, he was received by NATO allies with the kind of solemnity you would expect. We heard from Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary-General, just a few moments ago, and he was asked directly what was in that presentation. Of course, the details of what the Israeli Defense Minister shared stayed behind closed doors, but what we do know is that he showed the NATO Defense Ministers a video of some of the attacks by Hamas, some of the atrocities committed. Jens Stoltenberg saying he showed horrific pictures of the attacks and of the victims of the attacks, adding that it'll be up to the Israelis to reveal quite how much was in that video, but certainly it confirmed, according to Jens Stoltenberg, the brutality of the attacks and that civilians and young people were killed, and that certainly garnered the NATO support, standing by Israel, standing by its right to defend itself, and that is what Jens Stoltenberg has been saying at NATO, and let's have a listen to what he said earlier today.
Israel has the right to defend itself, and they have suffered horrendous terrorist attack over the weekend with many civilians killed. I also expect that, of course, when we see Israeli responses, it will be proportionate, and it is important as this conflict continues to do whatever is possible to prevent the loss of innocent civilian lives.
So crucially in that statement from Jens Stoltenberg, the word proportionate, expecting that Israel's response would be proportionate. Well, we just heard from Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, just a few minutes ago. He's still on his feet now at the podium, and he actually said that there were no conditions to US military aid to Israel, that Israel has a professional military and that they expect it will conduct itself in that way. But certainly the NATO alliance expressing individual member states expressing their support for Israel. It's important to remember that one NATO member state, Turkey, is involved in direct negotiation with both sides, and that will of course affect the politics of the defense ministers meeting, but certainly a clear message of solidarity with Israel and condemnation for Hamas's attack at NATO.
And Alex, ministers also talking about the damaged gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea. What have they been saying about that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. At the moment, it's very much an investigation stage. We know that Finland has said that a state actor cannot be ruled out and that an external actor was likely involved in the damage to that pipeline and that communications cable between Finland and Estonia. But as far as details as to what happened, that's all we know. It happened on Sunday. There was also a storm in the Baltic Sea at that time. So that is the amount of detail we have. Investigation ongoing is really the line from NATO, and that if an attack is proven, that's what we heard from Jens Stoltenberg, then there would be a united and determined response from NATO. Of course, we think back to the attacks on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, where for weeks, if not months, we had lengthy investigations by Sweden, Denmark, trying to figure out exactly what happened. That is very difficult with these deep-sea pipelines, deep-sea cables, so certainly it will take time, and the NATO allies, Finland, Estonia, not wanting to rush any conclusions, but certainly Jens Stoltenberg, if an attack is proved, promising a determined NATO response.
Alex, thank you very much. Our correspondent Alex Cadier there in Brussels. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the dust that could reveal the secrets of our solar system. NASA starts analysing an asteroid sample collected in space.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Food and fuel are running low in Gaza. Israel says the enclave will remain under a total siege until all hostages are released. The United States will never end support for Israel. Antony Blinken pledges more military aid and gives a warning to Hamas during a visit to Tel Aviv. And NATO condemns the Hamas attacks against Israel, but says the response must be proportionate. Search and rescue operations continue in western Afghanistan after its recent deadly earthquakes. An unknown number of people remain buried under the debris in Herat province. United Nations agencies, as well as Afghan and international organisations, are involved in the relief work. Our correspondent Zamariulai Abasin reports.
Currently, I'm in Ghalmushak, a village of Zindajan district in western Herat province. As you can see, the damage has also been made to this area, but some of the relief and aid organizations such as the Afghan Red Crescent Society and other UN agencies are on the ground and assisting them as much as possible. But this is not the only village. There are more than a dozen other villages of the same district of Herat province which are in dire need of assistance. Drinking water, food, shelter, tents are the immediate needs that they've been asking as an emergency relief from the de facto government and national and international organizations since last couple of days. I also spoke with the people. They say they are in urgent need because their children are now facing another disaster because they are living under the tents. The wind and dust is all around and they've been suffering a lot. Particularly the nights are chilly and that would be difficult for the children and elderly people.
We urge all Islamic and non-Islamic countries and all people to help us. Otherwise our children and families will suffer more.
We have nothing. We even lack fire to cook with, and we're entirely out of life-saving materials. We're frustrated, tired, and anxious. Affected people have severe anxiety and trauma. We've been counseling and sympathizing with the women who've suffered psychological effects. We provide them with treatment and other support.
But the de facto authorities are calling upon the international organizations to accelerate their efforts in the affected areas. According to the government authorities, they've been in close relationship with the international organizations and good coordination has been made and all the affected areas will be reached. That's the concern that the people have will not be applied correctly and timely. Zamariulai Abasin, CGTN, Herat province.
European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell is in China, hoping to iron out differences over the bloc's recent clampdown on Chinese green tech imports. The three-day visit is seen as laying the groundwork for a possible China-EU summit later this year. Borrell has been meeting a number of business representatives in Shanghai. The Vice President of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China, Carlo Diego D'Andrea, was one of them.
Indeed, we had the opportunity to meet Vice President Borrell. It was really interesting. I was along with other advisory council member of the European Chamber that, as you know, we have over 40 big companies, and they were representative from different sectors, from energy to pharmaceutical, but also financial. You know, the European Chamber is the voice of the European business here in China. So we express him which one are the opportunities and also the challenges that we are facing while we are doing in the business in the Chinese market.
And Carlo, as you said, doing business in China is a little bit more complicated than before. So what are the challenges facing the China-EU relations, and how do you think they need to be managed?
We have a mixed feeling because from one side you have the Chinese authorities that publish new opinions such as the 24 measure welcoming foreign investors, and on the other side you have publication of laws such as anti-espionage law or the one related to foreign related parties, which make feel that China is looking more to protect national security over to attract business. So the question that we had, and we were discussing also today with Vice President Borrell, is which kind of a relationship China wants to have with the foreign investor. Because for us, our members are here in China for the Chinese market and to stay in China. What we need is a strong implementation of the reform, because if not, we risk to fall into the promise fatigue.
How do you think that Borrell's visit could help address some of the concerns that you have now?
It's important that the representative they meet. Very glad that tomorrow I have the opportunity to meet the Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi in order to start to discuss how we can work together in different sectors. As you know, China and Europe, they are important trade partners, but in the past year, the trade imbalance grew from 1 to 2 to 1 to 3. So every things that China sell to Europe, the European buy street. And this create political tension back in our state member. It's important that we low down the systemic rivalry between the EU and China, and we focus more in the cooperation and in the partnership. This is kind of messages that the High Representative, I believe, will deliver to the Chinese counterpart, because at the moment, China is an important trade partner, but Europe is even more important for China as a trade partner. As you know, by the end of 22, over 6.2 million containers were moved from China to Europe. Instead, from Europe to China, only 1.2 million containers. So it's important that China will have more interest in buying European products in order to have an equilibrium in the trade relationship among countries.
Russia has launched a fresh wave of attacks on southern Ukraine, targeting grain depots around the town of Avdiivka. A Ukrainian military spokesperson confirmed a large grain storage facility has been attacked. The region has become increasingly important for Kyiv's food exports after Moscow left a deal allowing shipments via the Black Sea in July. 3 people have been killed and 2 others injured after a drone was shot down over southern Russia. The local governor says 3 bodies were recovered from one home which had been completely destroyed. Russian President Vladimir Putin is on a 2-day visit to Kyrgyzstan, his first foreign visit since the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for him in March. He's there to discuss trade ties and for a summit of former Soviet republics. Russia does not recognize the ICC's jurisdiction and has rejected its allegations. Poland and the Czech Republic will extend temporary controls on their borders with Slovakia into November as they seek to restrict illegal migration. The Polish government says the measures will now run until early November. It follows a similar order by the Czech government on Wednesday. A battle of the booze has started in Europe as fewer people drink wine. While drinking responsibly is recommended, it's causing concern amongst winemakers, with consumption down by 1/5 in some countries, as some people switch to craft beer instead. In response, France is spending millions of dollars to support winemakers. Our correspondent Stuart Smith reports from Bordeaux.
In August, France topped up an EU wine assistance programme to the tune of $210 million. The government said it was an emergency measure to stop prices collapsing. The problem is the country relies heavily on domestic consumption, and particularly when it comes to red wine, French people are drinking less. That's a big problem for producers in Bordeaux, 90% of whom make red wine.
Consumption of wine in France is decreasing. In 1950, we were consuming 150 liters per people per year, and last year it was 40. And figures show that maybe in 10 more years we will be at 30 liters per people per year. My grandparents were drinking wine every lunch, every dinner. My kids, they are 25, they are drinking wine once a week or twice a week.
The government and wine producers largely agree that the industry is going to have to change what it produces in order to survive.
Young people are looking for more fruity wine, less tannins, less wood maybe, because they are going to have this wine in aperitif without food. So we have to change maybe the way we are making the wine so they are easy drinking wine.
Another solution is focusing more on exporting wine to more enthusiastic drinkers abroad.
China is drinking more and more every year. Japan is drinking more. We are also looking at Africa. Maybe in more 5, 10, 20 years, Africa is going to be a big market for Bordeaux wine. But nowadays, consumption in France is decreasing faster than the increase of the export. This is why there is a crisis.
In Bordeaux alone, that means 8 million litres of wine will be converted into industrial alcohol this year, and 10% of Bordeaux's vineyards have been dug up to reduce supply next year.
For the vineyards, those changing tastes are a problem to be solved, but for Bordeaux's brewers, it's a trend to be taken advantage of.
At Maison de Pipe, like thousands of new breweries since 2012, they're filling bottles not with wine, but with beer. The grain is from France, and the drinks appeal to the modern French palate, as well as French habits.
It's what we call the afterwork. But it's new for us in France. It's that time of afterwork. Here in Bordeaux, we are in the southwest of France, near Spain, which is very known also for that time of drinking, tapas, and things like that.
For that kind of social, after-work drinking, Guillaume believes a fresher, lighter drink is more appealing than red wine.
There is no war between wine and beer. We all have to be humble and modest. It's all about the consumers, and it's all about their palate. And the palate is just saying, I want lighter.
The Bordeaux Wine Council is launching a big campaign next January aimed at China, America and Japan. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Bordeaux.
NASA has revealed the first glimpse of samples taken from an asteroid named Bennu, which they believe could provide new information on the origins of the solar system. Weighing an estimated 250 grams, it's the largest asteroid sample ever collected in space. Our correspondent Tony Waterman reports.
Oh, you ready to see the results of the mission? Take a peek.
NASA scientists believe this dark powdery dust and these small rock-like particles could hold the secret to the origins of life on Earth. Early analysis of the samples scooped up from the asteroid Bennu shows it's rich in carbon, about 5% by weight, and also contains water, two of the essential building blocks for life.
So let's start out with taking a look at what we've gotten into so far. As Francis
that water, NASA says, is captured in these water-bearing clay fibers.
The reason that Earth is a habitable world, that we have oceans and lakes and rivers and rain, is because these clay minerals like the ones we're seeing from Bennu, landed on Earth 4 billion years ago to 4.5 billion years ago, making our world habitable. So we're seeing the way that water got incorporated into solid material and then ultimately into planets, and not just Earth, but probably Venus and Mars.
And scientists are just scratching the surface. The asteroid sample has been on Earth for less than 3 weeks.
We have touchdown. I repeat, EDL.
Parachuting down in the Utah desert last month after a 7-year, 6 billion kilometer journey. The lid containing the actual sample hasn't even been lifted yet. Scientists have instead been studying the bonus dust collected around it. A great problem to have, says Astromaterials curator Francis McCubbin.
Because we need to very meticulously and carefully collect every grain, it's taking us a little longer to get inside, but the view so far is amazing.
What has been collected is being painstakingly analyzed in a special clean room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. NASA says at least 70% of it will be stored for future research. Some of the remainder will be broken down into smaller parcels and distributed to more than 200 scientists around the world for analysis.
This stuff is an astrobiologist's dream. This material will be around for generations and generations. We're going to learn so much about the origin of the solar system, the evolution, and potentially how even life started here on Earth.
And this could be just the beginning. NASA is planning to shoot off another spacecraft as soon as Thursday. This one bound for the giant metal-rich asteroid Psyche, which is orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. If all goes according to plan, the spacecraft, which is also called Psyche, will reach the asteroid in July of 2029, taking the very first photos of the rock, which scientists believe is comprised of iron and nickel, much like Earth's core, as a search to understand how all of this came into existence. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
The headlines again. These are live pictures from Gaza as thick black smoke rises into the sky. Food and fuel are running low there. Israel says the Palestinian enclave will remain under total siege until all hostages are released. And the United States says it will never end its support for Israel. Anthony Blinken pledges more military aid and gives a warning to Hamas during a visit to Tel Aviv. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast. Starting with weather conditions, you could see a wide range of rainfall and winter precipitation across much of the western, central, all the way to eastern Europe this Friday. Then moving to Saturday, you could see the rainy conditions will expand into larger areas. Even Iberian Peninsula will have rain chances. Temperature-wise, daily highs could be still in 20s for much of western, central Europe, and over to eastern part, you could see the daily highs be around 10 degrees Celsius on Friday. Then as we look into Saturday, the daily highs for much of the central Europe will go downward. Significant drop will be top concern as we look into this weekend or early next Monday and Tuesday. Take a closer look at a city forecast. We're going to have daily highs around 15 for Copenhagen, Stockholm, all the way to Helsinki with rainfall. Over to Mainz, see 20 to 9 degrees only and 21 to 13 for folks in Kiev. Moving to Moscow, 14 to 5 plus rainfall, a bit chilly. Eventually back to Western Europe, 16 for the daily highs in London and Paris. Down to Madrid and Lisbon, a chance of showers with daily highs around 25. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.